They'd smashed 3 of my mailboxes already. At 5 a.m. on Monday, number 4 turned the tables and smashed them back. Picture this: fresh mug of coffee, security monitor glowing, the HOA's self-appointed community patrol barreling through my fence line in the same black SUV. 45 minutes, 0 brains, turning cedar posts to splinters for the 3rd time in as many months. They treat the cul-de-sac like their personal speedway, writing counterfeit tickets and scaring anyone who challenges their beige commandments. Trouble is, I'm a Texas rancher who can weld a bull stall. So I built a mailbox that looked as harmless as barnwood, but hit like a linebacker in steel armor. Drop a note in the comments and tell us what corner of the country you're tuning in from. If tales of runaway HOAs, real-world payback, and twisty endings make your morning coffee taste sweeter, go on and punch that subscribe button. Because tomorrow's episode cranks the crazy up a notch, and the curveball I've got lined up after that, you'll want a front row seat. Of course, the collision wasn't the real headline. Marlene Voss arriving 10 minutes later in her power suit was. She slid out of a hastily summoned pickup like a barracuda leaving Silkwater, clipboard already cocked for combat. Gus Mailbox, Martine trailed behind, owl-eyed and grease-stained, chanting, "Where's the mail gonna go?" as though envelopes were orphaned puppies. Marlene surveyed the mangled patrol cruiser and decided the true hazard was my non-regulation post. "Mr. Landon, your mailbox now represents a safety threat," she announced, ignoring the steaming hood. She tore off a pastel citation, 1 grand plus mandatory beige replacement, then spun on her heels to photograph the scene from angles that flattered neither me nor the truth. I suggested speed bumps over speed runs. She quoted Bylaw 12.3 about visual harmony and advised I use the next 30 days wisely. That, friends, is bureaucrat for kneel or bleed. Back inside, I rewound the footage like a football ref hunting intent, and intent practically waved from the driver's seat. That same SUV had leveled Mrs. Delgado's sunflowers after she refused to paint them beige and had tailed Colonel Brewster for a mile, flashing bogus lights because his porch flag violated quiet hours. Pattern, motive, opportunity. The crime show trifecta served hotter than my second cup. When Hank called, we shared the grim laugh of men old enough to remember when neighbors borrowed sugar instead of legislating shrub height. "What's your move?" he asked. "Physics," I said, sketching on a napkin. If Marlene worshipped pastel order, I'd introduce her to Newtonian chaos wrapped in reclaimed oak. My welding rig hadn't seen action like this since I built a storm shelter that could double as a bank vault. This mailbox would look Amish on the outside and Pentagon on the inside. I wanted the next SUV to feel like it had just tried to headbutt the Alamo. I spent the afternoon prowling the hardware store like a kid in a candy aisle of rebar and quickcrete, loading the truck with enough steel to embarrass a battleship. The cashier raised an eyebrow. Stainless plate? Fiber mesh? Epoxy anchors? But I just said, "art project," and winked. Back at the ranch, sparks flew in orange constellations while Merle Haggard preached through the shop radio, each weld bead an insurance payment against stupidity. By dusk, a skeleton of defiance stood 8 feet tall, ready for its oak camouflage. Over supper, I drafted a polite email to the HOA. "Dear Board, replacement mailbox under construction and will comply with height requirements. Color TBD." I nearly added, "expect thrills," but subtlety is a far sharper blade. That night, the hill country sky was clear enough to shame a planetarium, and I lay in bed listening to coyotes debate the moon, mind buzzing louder than my angle grinder. Somewhere out there, Marlene was tallying fresh finds and plotting her next mailbox murder. Somewhere in here, a half-finished Titan post was curing like a secret. I drifted off, imagining the dawn collision, the crunch of entitlement against engineering, and the viral caption already writing itself, "When beige meets science." Before the coffee maker blinked 5:30, I'd rehearsed my speech for the insurance adjuster. Something scholarly about kinetic energy and poor life choices, and pictured Gus explaining physics to a claims clerk while muttering about homeless envelopes. I also pictured Marlene popping a vein when she discovered the same bylaw she wields like a saber actually requires mailboxes to withstand reasonable environmental hazards, and nothing in Texas is more hazardous than a fed-up rancher with a MIG welder. Those thoughts rocked me to sleep like cattle lowing past the mesquite, and for the first time in months, I greeted Monday with anticipation instead of dread. The barn house smelled of stale coffee and fresh intimidation, the kind of aroma you remember from IRS waiting rooms. Marlene stood in front of a pull-down screen that squeaked down like a guillotine, her PowerPoint titled Beautification Through Compliance, flashing beige bullet points in rapid succession. She clicked her remote with the cadence of a Gatling gun. 42 violations rattled off before the first slide cooled. Grass at 2.7 inches, sunflowers deemed too joyful, and a kid's swing set condemned for existing in an unregulated tow. The projector's whir drilled the words straight into everyone's molars, and each new citation felt like a parking ticket pinned to the soul. Folks shifted in folding chairs, whispering their mortgage figures like prayers, and I could feel tension stack higher than Texas summer humidity. Nobody blinked, because the next regulation might target eyelids. Stay tuned, Marlene was just setting the table. Rosa Delgado gripped her violation sheet with both hands as if it might sprout thorns. Her yellow daisies, planted for the husband she buried 2 springs ago, were now apparently an aggressive hue. Beside her sat Colonel Hank Brewster, sleeves rolled, flagpin blinking under fluorescent light like a soldier's heartbeat. Hank had spent 30 years defending freedom overseas, only to have his porch flag fined at home for after-hours waving. When Marlene invited public comment, Rosa's voice trembled, but carried, "Those flowers keep my memories alive. What fine covers that?" Hank followed, his baritone steady as a marine cadence. "Ma'am, that flag flew over Fallujah. Take it down yourself if you think the crescent moon's feelings outrank Old Glory." The room inhaled as one, waiting for impact. Marlene's smile froze like pond ice in July. Every story added lead to the bullets she'd eventually fire. You'll want to hear how she reloads. My turn came, and I ambled to the mic, coffee thermos in hand, boots clicking slower than her remote. "Funny thing," I began, letting the words stretch like chewing gum. "Us PS drives red, white, and blue trucks, yet they've never taken a detour through my mailbox. And they certainly don't enforce grass height." A ripple of nervous laughter broke the tension, like pressure escaping a tire on a downhill grade. Marlene's jaw tightened to the tensile strength of carbon fiber, but she stayed on script. "Some men break rules," she said, voice silky as a lawyer's pen, "and some rules break men." I leaned closer, catching the perfume of printed bylaws. "Darlin', rules don't break men. Physics does. And your patrol's about to meet both." A hush swept the crowd the way a breeze sweeps tall grass right before lightning. You can imagine how lightning was next on the forecast. Keep listening. Marlene moved to the next slide. Fine schedule revision, and the numbers popped up like slot machine cherries. 500 for a fence, 2 shades off drab. 800 if your kid's bikes leaned outside the garage. Her pointer danced across the revenue column, practically wagging its tail at the projected totals. "Compliance fines," she cooed. "Censure neighborhood excellence." But the math on her spreadsheet was as inflated as county fair balloons. 1,000 here, 1,500 there, all funneling through an administrative fund she managed with the secrecy of a magician's hat. I saw heads bow over calculators, homeowners realizing their HOA was a cash vacuum disguised as curb appeal. It dawned on them that reading bylaws should have been as routine as checking interest rates. The collective gulp that followed was louder than any protest. They'd pay close attention now. Terror has an excellent memory. As the meeting crawled toward adjournment, I sidled up to Hank and whispered the night's true headline. "I'm welding something tonight that'll outlive both of us." His eyes gleamed like steel under torchlight, understanding without further detail. In the back row, Gus shifted, hearing just enough to look worried. The promise of an immovable mailbox seeded hope in a room starved for backbone. Folks suddenly lingered, swapping violation stories instead of rushing home to mow grass to regulation length. Rosa pressed a sunflower seed packet into my palm and whispered, "Plant these by the new mailbox. Color code be damned." The seeds felt like tiny votes against tyranny. By the time folding chairs squealed shut, Marlene sensed she'd lost the room's quiet obedience. She clacked out on heels sharp enough to trim non-compliant shrubs, muttering to her lawyer about escalation protocols. The real show, friends, would begin under the cover of Texas stars. Don't step away now. The sparks you'll see next could weld more than steel. They might just fuse a community. I drove home beneath a sky so wide it made problems look small, unless your problem had flashing patrol lights and a taste for cedar posts. Under my workshop's fluorescent hum, I unrolled fresh blueprints, Titan Post 2. The first version had survived physics. The sequel would survive politics. Quarter-inch stainless plates lay stacked like oversized playing cards, waiting for their winning hand. On the workbench, a battered copy of the HOA covenant sat open to reasonable structural standards, a clause so vague it practically begged for my interpretation. Every weld bead I laid down was a period at the end of Marlene's sentence, and while the steel cooled, I scribbled a note for tomorrow's coffee pot. Value nugget. Always read the bylaws like you read your mortgage. One typo can cost you your porch, but the ink wasn't dry before I heard Marlene's SUV rumble past my drive, slow as a shark in shallow water. The game was on, and my next move was curing in concrete. Stick around. The Dawn Patrol's about to learn the alphabet of impact, and the first letter is K, for kinetic surprise. When a rulebook lands on your porch, treat it like a mortgage contract. Read every comma, question every fee, and compare the numbers to basic common sense. Petty power only thrives in silence. The moment neighbors trade isolation for conversation, bullies shrink and bylaws bend back to their intended purpose, protecting, not punishing. Stand together, document everything, and remember, the best defense against arbitrary authority is a community welded by knowledge and a dash of humor. If you've ever faced down a clipboard bully or worried you might share your own HOA horror in the comments so we can add it to the growing case file, hit subscribe and ring that bell because tomorrow night I'm firing up the welder, the patrol car is revving for round 4, and the first sparks will teach a masterclass in unintended consequences. Remember, knowing the rules isn't enough. Standing together is what turns paper regulations into paper tigers. Ready to see how a community becomes unbreakable steel? Stick around. Section 3 drops at dawn. The shop smelled like arc flash and ambition, a cross between a blacksmithy and a NASA clean room. If Fort Knox and a cowboy boot had a baby, this would be its nursery. Sparks scattered off the MiG tip in orange constellations, lighting up rebar cages stout enough to give a wrecking ball stage fright. I'd poured 4,000 Ideolix concrete into a sleeve of stainless that could moonlight as submarine hull, labeled every plate in Sharpie Crumple Zone ABC so future archaeologists could identify the fossils of bad decisions. The grinder whined like a dentist's drill on espresso while Merle Haggard crooned about fighting the good fight. And each pass of the weld bead felt like adding another paragraph to the HOA's resignation letter. I set the oak veneer aside, letting it soak up the glow, because nothing says, "Welcome mail carrier," like barnwood hiding an attitude problem. Stay with me. The best sparks were still airborne. Tech upgrades came next. I embedded a 360-degree camera in what looked like a rusty horseshoe, ran a vibration sensor so sensitive it could feel a moth sneeze, and tucked a trail cam up an oak limb, my squirrel paparazzi, ready to film any midnight celebrity appearances. Over the door, I mounted a thin solar panel disguised as a weathered shingle, the kind of cloak-and-dagger detail that makes secret agents jealous and electricians nod in quiet respect. Wiring it all to a DVR box the size of a lunch pail, I set alerts to ping my phone faster than my ex could text, "We need to talk." By the time the system chirped its test ping, I'd basically built NORAD for postage rates, and the thought of Marlene's patrol car meeting this fortress had me grinning like a kid who'd just figured out where Dad hides the fireworks. Hang tight, the fuse was almost touching powder. Right on cue, Gus Mailbox Martin showed up just before dusk, poking his head in under the pretense of checking mail slot specs. He shuffled around the skeleton frame, snapping photos with a phone he tried to hide under his clipboard. "Subtle as a raccoon in the henhouse. Gotta be sure your slot's regulation width," he muttered, eyes darting everywhere except the actual slot. I played dumb and let him wander, though the lens on his phone reflected workshop sparks like gilt in a funhouse mirror. When he finally left, I hit replay on the security feed and caught a perfect shot of him texting my blueprint photos to a number labeled M. If infiltration were a sport, Gus had just fumbled on the 1-yard line. Little did he know every click put him deeper into the digital mousetrap I'd wired for nosy rat. Keep listening, the cheese was still irresistible. Midnight brought a new flavor of trouble. An anonymous email with shaky grammar and sharper intent. "Thought you should see what, wife might," it began, followed by a video attachment. The clip showed a man who looked suspiciously like me in my barn, leaning far too close to someone who definitely wasn't on my Christmas card list. Lighting was off, shadows strange, but it was good enough to start a rumor wildfire in a drought season. Deep fake tech cheap, sloppy, yet lethal if lobbed into the right gossip circle. My pulse spiked, then leveled. I'd seen better forgery in kindergarten finger paint. Still, the stakes had just gone from cedar posts to character assassination. I forwarded the file to Hank, who replied with one line, "Scorched earth it is." That's the thing about veterans. Once they've stood in real fire, digital flames don't scare them. Stick around. The blackmailers were about to learn pixel magic can backfire like a stalled Ford. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a trail cam alert. The oak-top paparazzi had caught Marlene herself at the edge of my property, moonlight bouncing off her blazer like tinfoil on a baked potato. She handed a thick envelope to a hooded figure clutching what could only be a sledgehammer, because apparently subtlety isn't taught in HOA finishing school. Their whispers barely registered on the mic, but I heard "tonight" and "barn." Enough consonants to spell felony. As they split up, I whispered to nobody, "Bring it." The Titan post loomed in the shadows behind me, gleaming under a single work light like an awaiting jury. Tomorrow would decide whether physics or pettiness ruled our cul-de-sac, and I already had my closing argument welded into 300 pounds of immovable truth. Don't wander off. Impact Hour was on the horizon. If you're 50 plus and tired of feeling like technology left you at dial-up, know this: a couple of GoPros, a motion sensor floodlight, and a trail cam from the sporting goods aisle can transform any front porch into mission control without torching the Social Security budget. Layer simple devices, wire them to one app, and let bullies discover the modern miracle of instant replay, preferably when their bumper meets your bulletproof mailbox. The night vision feed painted the world in swampy green, every fence post glowing like a radioactive picket. 3:43, I mem. My phone's stamp matched the thunder in my ribs. Down the county road, the black Escalade idled like a bull breathing hot tar, headlights off, engine hum vibrating through mesquite. I watched from the cab of my Silverado, thermal mug in hand, coffee kept so cold by nerves it might as well have been iced tea. The driver revved once, twice, then floored it. Gravel flew like confetti at a crooked parade. Through the camera, I saw the SUV grow larger, jaw unhinged, teeth bared. Charging the Titan post I'd welded with the patience of a saint and the spite of a scorned welder. The moment before contact always feels elastic, a rubber band stretched to the snapping point. You count half a heartbeat, wondering if physics still keeps its promises. Stick around. Tonight, Newton was in a generous mood. Impact sounded like a steel drum solo played with a wrecking ball. Titan post didn't flinch, it merely reminded the Escalade that mass and velocity have rent due. The front end folded like an accordion at a barn dance, hood buckling into pleats, engine block punching itself in the face. Airbags deployed with twin shotgun booms, turning Marlene's pristine power suit into a wrinkled paper sack spritzed with talcum. Gus, who had been jogging behind the SUV, waving a clipboard, learned that Newton governs pedestrians too. He tripped over a rut, pirouetted midair, then slam-dunked his face into the manure pile Thunder had so graciously deposited earlier. Poetic justice is best served organic. I kept my finger on record, camera steady while chaos rewrote the HOA handbook one bent fender at a time. Trust me, you'll want to see the slow-mo. The Escalade hissed steam and antifreeze, grill smoking like it had just puffed a cheap cigar. Marlene flailed against an airbag that refused to respect her authority. Seatbelt locked, door jammed, she looked less like a president and more like laundry stuck in a front leader. I strolled over, porch tea calm, filming from a respectful distance. She muffled something about lawsuits and booby traps, but the words came out cotton-stuffed, like a ventriloquist dummy arguing contract law. Gus staggered upright, face glazed with barnyard mousse, mumbling, "Mail slot still non-compliant," before collapsing again. For a moment, the pasture wind was the only spectator applause, rustling grass that no longer feared a measuring tape. Still, I stayed silent. Sometimes the truest punchline is letting an opponent read their own obituary in real time. Stay tuned. The encore had another act. Leaves rustled, and out stepped Mike Chen, community videographer, camera rig gleaming under infrared like a samurai sword. He waved his press badge, a laminated printout that fooled no one, then grinned. "Got it all, Marlene," he said, lens still rolling. "But I'm uploading for the other team." Her eyes widened to saucer width, mascara cracking like desert mud. Mike flipped his screen toward me. Angle 1 showed the impact, Angle 2 captured her envelope handoff 2 nights earlier, and Angle 3 exposed Gus photographing my workshop blueprints. "Insurance fraud, harassment, reckless endangerment," he ticked off, and that's before we even get to the deep fake blackmail. Marlene sputtered like a drowning tea kettle, but words failed her. It's hard to grandstand when your airbags are hugging you tighter than your lawyer ever will. Blink, the upload meter was already crawling past 30%. Back in the truck, I strung clips into a 90-second supercut titled "When Beige Meets Steel," soundtrack courtesy of a copyright-free honky-tonk riff. First frame, the Escalade rocketing forward. Second, Titan Post chilling like a Bud Light in a Yeti. Third, accordion hood. Fourth, Gus's manure nosedive, capped with Marlene's muffled threat, "I'll have your ease," and cut to boom as the second airbag detonated. I hit next, then XO, the digital equivalent of dropping the mic. Notifications exploded faster than popcorn kernels. Likes, shares, shocked emojis, local Facebook groups lit up. Someone cross-posted to the HOA horror subreddit. A cousin in Ohio texted, "Is this your mailbox trending on Twitter?" I sipped the now-cold coffee, savoring bitter notes of roast and revenge. Keep watching. Virality is the one virus HOA bylaws can't quarantine. Here's the lesson welded into every inch of stainless tonight. Record, don't rage. A pocketful of cameras, a dash of patience, and physics on your side will outmuscle any clipboard tyrant. Whether you're 50+ or fresh out of patience, stack your tech like you stack firewood. Layered, ready, and pointed toward winter. Documentation turns driveway vendettas into courtroom exhibits, and public exposure makes bullies wilt faster than illegal sunflowers. Tomorrow we'll tally the view count, answer a few reporter calls, and maybe plant roses seeds around Titan Post for a pop of outlaw yellow. Grab your popcorn. The aftermath will be messier than Gus's face, and twice as satisfying. Nothing disarms a bully faster than cold evidence and unblinking daylight. Before you swing back, hit record, anchor your truth as solid as steel, and let their own momentum finish the fight. In a world of he said, she said, video turns chaos into clarity, and clarity turns frightened neighbors into an unbreakable chorus. So, if you've ever felt an HOA bumper edging toward your sanity, grab your phone, press record, and weld your own line in the sand. Because tomorrow the real trial begins. Marlene may be pinned against an airbag tonight, but she's still got lawyers, deepfake tricks, and one last scorched earth playbook up her silk sleeve. Come back for part 5 to watch what happens when her private beautification fund collides with a forensic audit and 10,000 angry neighbors. Remember, Cameras don't blink, bylaws don't bluff, and the best armor you can own is community united by evidence. Stay tuned. Justice is about to hit publish. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since when Beige Meets Steel went live, and by noon the comment section looked like a digital town hall meeting on steroids. Grandmas were swapping legal advice like cookie recipes. Teenagers were remixing the impact footage with dubstep. One retired CPA even posted a spreadsheet tallying Marlene's suspected fines in real time. Every ding felt like another snowflake on an avalanche. Thousands of neighbors, ex-neighbors, and perfect strangers piling on with screenshots, invoice scans, and dashcam clips that painted Marlene's beautification crusade as nothing more than a beige-washed cash grab. I kept scrolling, coffee going cold, marveling at how a Mailbox video could turn the internet into a jury box. Stay with me, because the verdict was only warming up. Stories poured in faster than a July flash flood. A widower from 3 streets over uploaded proof of paying 11 separate lawn tone violations for grass that laboratory tests certified as identical to regulation turf. His fines alone topped $5,000. A single mom produced photos of her driveway measured with a laser level at 0.3 dg too steep. Cost $800. By supper time, Mike Chen posted a running total: $103,742.66 in questionable penalties, and that was just from folks with digital receipts. Each new tale acted like gasoline on an already roaring fire, and every share button hit felt like a match. Hang on, the flames were about to lick past county lines. Mike didn't stop at spreadsheets. He stitched together side-by-side news clippings showing Marlene grinning under different HOA banners from Arizona to Georgia. Same pearls, same grin, same neighborhood carnage. He dubbed it the HOA Ponzi route, and the timeline read like a true crime roadmap. Community takes her in, bylaws tighten, fines spike, treasury mysteriously vanishes, Marlene moves on, rinse, repeat. Seeing her face slide across the states was like watching a tornado hopscotch through the heartland, leaving beige debris wherever it touched down. The comment count doubled again, and someone started a betting pool on which talk show would book her first. Stick around, because Marlene hadn't hit the final commercial break yet. Right when the story felt maxed out, Gus waddled onto my porch, clutching a thumb drive like it was baby Moses. His eyes were red, shirt still faintly scented of last night's manure facial. "I'm done being her errand boy," he croaked, hands trembling as he passed me the drive. Inside were blackmail files Marlene kept like baseball cards, compromising photos, forged infractions, even draft emails threatening to out a veteran's PTSD if he didn't repaint his shed. Bute's voice cracked halfway through an apology, and for a second the porch light made the tears on his cheeks look like welding sparks. I shook his hand, oil, sweat, manure, and all, and promised the community would remember courage louder than cowardice. Keep listening. A reckoning was being scheduled, and every slot was VIP. We booked the emergency meeting in the same barn Marlene once called her Palace of Compliance. Mike's projector splashed evidence across plywood walls in fonts larger than her ego, whole corridors of shame detailing each bogus ticket, each forged signature. Residents taped their violation notices into a mural that grew until it looked like a patchwork quilt, stitched from every sin she'd sown. When the total fines crossed $120.00 K, Rosa Delgado planted a pot of outlaw yellow daisies on stage and dared anyone to cite her. The room erupted in applause that rattled rafters older than the HOA itself. You could feel the fear evacuate, replaced by something sturdier. Call it community backbone dipped in rebar. Yet the night's main event was still circling the block. Right on cue, Deputy Lila Hart marched in with a warrant that gleamed like sunrise on chrome. Marlene stood mid-rant, accusing us of digital terrorism, when Lila tapped her shoulder. Click went the cuffs, pop went another camera flash, and the crowd roared like Friday night football. Hank Brewster snapped a salute toward the Titan post visible through the double doors. Hard to tell if he was honoring the mailbox or the freedom it now symbolized. Marlene shrieked that she'd sue every last one of us, but the only thing filing at that moment was the line of neighbors eager to give statements. Still, lawyers clung to her like static. Her defense team whispered of irrefutable evidence, and you could sense one last iceberg floating our way. Stick close. The temperature was about to drop. Next morning, courtroom packed. Her attorney wheeled in a TV like it was the Ark of the Covenant. He queued up the deepfake barn footage, claiming it showed me in compromising conduct unbecoming a pillar of the community. Gasps popped like bubble wrap. The judge leaned forward. Even I felt my pulse jitter, though I'd seen the magic trick before. The lawyer smirked, convinced pixels would outweigh physics, but deep inside that thumb drive Gus gave me sat the original editing emails, timestamps, and payment receipts signed by Marlene herself. I reached into my briefcase, felt the cool metal of that drive, and knew the plot twist was ours to pull. Come back for next, because watching a forged video collapse under forensic light is the kind of finale you pop popcorn for. And the lesson waiting at the end, it's bigger than any mailbox. Judge Penelope Galvanado Harris took the bench with the swagger of a rodeo queen waving a 12-pound mallet, and the gallery reacted like they'd scored 50-yard line seats at the Super Bowl of petty tyranny. Retirees clutching thermoses, teenagers live-streaming to cousins, even Hank in full dress blues polishing an imaginary medal every time the Titan post was mentioned. The bailiff called, "All rise," but half the room was already on its feet, anticipation crackling like July power lines, because everyone wanted to see whether Marlene's 7-layer deception cake would hold shape under the courtroom broiler. I straightened my bolo tie, whispered a prayer to Saint Concrete, and reminded myself that the bigger the spectacle, the harder the fall. Stick around. Gravity was about to get a workout. Marlene's lawyer, a slick fellow who smelled of cedar shavings and panic, opened with what he thought was a haymaker. The Titan post, he argued, was a premeditated vehicular ambush, a malicious booby trap designed to lure innocent Escalades to their doom. He clicked through slides of crumpled fenders and dramatic stock photos of whiplash victims until the judge's eyebrow arched so high it nearly joined her hairline. He pictured his argument as a piñata stuffed with lawsuits, looked colorful, made noise, but one good swing and the candy would be all over the floor. Gavelnado leaned forward, voice sweet as pecan pie. "Counselor, are you suggesting the defendant was forced, at 45 miles per hour, into Mr. Cashwell's stationary mailbox?" The lawyer swallowed hard. The gallery swallowed harder, eager for the next swing. Enter Dr. Felicia Grant, structural engineer and part-time stand-up nerd. She wrapped the witness box like it owed her rent and declared, "Titan Post is a legal mailbox. Same footprint, same height, just heavier than Miss Devereaux's conscience." Laughter ricocheted off the ceiling tiles. Even the stenographer snorted. Grant unfurled schematics, highlighted USPS compliance, and finished by holding up a chunk of the 4,000 PSI concrete core. "This is not a weapon. It's a boundary. Vehicles cross it at their own peril." The jury nodded, pens scribbling like woodpeckers. I could almost hear Titan Post humming in satisfaction back on the ranch, and I knew the defense's piñata had sprung its first leak. Wait for it? More sweets were about to spill. Then Gus shuffled to the stand, thumb drive clutched like a rosary. His confession poured out. Blackmail, forged fines, late-night surveillance. Each fact, another nail in Marlene's designer coffin. The prosecution projected spreadsheets showing $128,000, 0 cents, siphoned into her beautification fund, which, turns out, beautified nothing but her travel mileage and spa days. Hank Brewster let out a low whistle that whistled right back, and Rosa Delgado dabbed tears of vindication with a yellow daisy hanky. Gus ended by looking straight at the jury. "I was her enforcer till the mailbox hit back. Now I'm returning every penny." The silence that followed felt thick enough to spread on toast, and Marlene's posture shrank 3 inches as she realized her last henchman had traded armor for truth. Stick with me. The coffin lid wasn't shut yet. Desperate, the defense rolled in the deep fake video, claiming it showed me in unbecoming conduct. On the big screen, my digital doppelganger cavorted like a bad soap opera extra, but metadata doesn't lie. Prosecution's tech experts sliced the file apart, cloned audio fingerprints, timecode mismatch, rendering tags from a laptop registered to Marleno's niece. The lawyer sputtered objections until Gavalnado threatened contempt. One more pixel and he'd be wearing stripes to match his tie. The jury laughed, the gallery cheered, and even the American flag behind the bench seemed to flap a little prouder. The fake collapsed faster than a flimsy lawn chair at a Texas barbecue, leaving the defense with nothing but splinters and the smell of reheated embarrassment. Anticipate the verdict? You bet, but savor this next beat. 12 citizens needed just 74 minutes to return guilty on all counts. Marlene was banned for life from any HOA role, sentenced to repay every stolen dime, plus 2,000 hours scrubbing community mailboxes. Irony polished to a mirror shine. Outside, neighbors signed a charter limiting future boards to 2-year terms, expanding the color palette to anything but tyranny beige, and installing transparent budgeting like bulletproof glass. The first act of the new HOA was unanimous, a bronze plaque on Titan Post reading Concrete Justice, established 2025, SUV 0, Freedom 1. As I drove home, sunset blazing over hill country, I felt lighter than a mailbox without fines. Lesson welded into every frame of this saga. Build your defenses in daylight, document in HD, and remember that a united neighborhood is harder to bulldoze than any curbside sentinel. Next time you hear a clipboard snapping shut, you'll know exactly where to aim your camera and your courage. That night, I sat on the porch, Titan Post silhouetted against a Texas moon bright enough to read victory by, and I realized the real win wasn't a crumpled Escalade or a guilty verdict. It was neighbors who finally traded whispers for voices, fear for backbone, and beige for every color in the hardware aisle. My ranch feels bigger now, not because the fence moved, but because the burden of silence lifted. Concrete and community share a secret strength. They both get tougher under pressure if you mix them right. So what's the takeaway you can pocket like spare change? First, paper trails beat power trips. Document, date stamp, double save. Second, a bully's loudest weapon is isolation. Cut that wire by banding together. Third, bylaws are like rattlesnakes. Study them before they bite. If this saga hammered anything home, it's that ordinary folks armed with evidence and unity can outweld any crooked rulebook. If those lessons ring true. Or if you've got your own HOA war story itching for daylight, drop a comment below. Your voice might be the blueprint for someone else's Titan Post. Smash the like button if you believe community trumps tyranny, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next jaw-dropping chapter of neighborhood justice. Stories are stronger when we build them together, and the next one's already pouring the concrete. If tonight's tale hammered a little courage into your toolkit, don't keep it under the workbench. Pass it on. Share this video with a neighbor, cousin, or buddy who's knee-deep in their own HOA headache so they can see how solid documentation and a united front beat intimidation every time. And after you've fired it off, swing back and tell me what part hit hardest down in the comments. Your insight might be the spark for our next concrete victory story. One more favor before you ride off into the sunset. What neighborhood nightmare or victory should we tackle next? Drop your requests in the comments or over on the community tab. Whether it's rogue parking patrols, weaponized noise ordinances, or that one board member who thinks they're the zoning czar, tell me what keeps you up at night, and I'll weld it into a future episode. Your ideas steer this channel, so speak up, and let's build the next story together.